Hello, my name is Joelle, and I'll be presenting my team profile generator. So my task was to build a Node.js command line application that takes in information about employees on a software engineering team and generate an HTML web page that displays summaries for each person. So first, what I did was I created an employee.js page, and I created a class for this employee along with its constructors, so name, ID, and email, and I called it using this name, this ID, and this email. And then I called the getName function and returned this name. Same with getID and returned this ID, and then getEmail. And then I also created a getRole, which returned the employee, which is this employee class. And then I exported it. And using Jest, I created an employee test. So I required the employee library over here, and then created a new employee using these parameters. So Joelle is the name, and then this is the ID, and this is the email. And then I tested for each. So this first test was if we can get the constructor values for the employee object. So I tested the name, ID, and email. And then here I tested the getName method along with the getID method and the getEmail method and getRole method. And I first tested them and they all failed. And then when I inputted the code, then they all passed. And I did the exact same for manager, intern, and engineer, but so the employee was actually the parent, and then the other three are the children. So manager actually takes from the employee class, and I require it up here, and it extends employee. So here, instead of rewriting these three parameters, name, ID, and email, I was able to call the parent constructor using super, and I also added a new parameter, which is office number. And this was called over here. And the get role was also called, and this is manager up here. And then I exported it. And I tested it, and I did the same thing as I tested with the employee, except for I also added the get office number, and yeah, the get role is also called. So this was done the exact same way for the intern and the engineer. So I'll just skip through those. And then I will explain my app.js. So here I require inquire, and I also require 3 classes. I don't have to require the employee because that's the parent, so they're inherited by these 3 classes. I created a generate site, which I'll explain after this page. And then the file system was required, so it was the path and the output path to create the HTML. And then I created an empty array called team members. And basically I prompted each manager, employee, engineer, intern. So the first thing that was prompted was the manager. And this prompted the name, employee ID, email, and office number. And then it took all those answers and it created a new manager, and it took the answers and the name, answers, email, employee ID, email, and office number, and then it pushed all these answers to the manager. And then after this function, it called the prompt menu function. And this prompt menu prompted with 3 choices. So there's engineer, intern, or finish building my team. And then I used a switch function. So if add an engineer was chosen, then it would prompt the engineer function. If add an intern was chosen, then it would prompt the intern. And then the default would be building the team. So here, if prompt engineer was chosen, then it would go to this function. And it would prompt for the name, the employee ID, email, and GitHub username. And here it would do the same as above. It would create a new engineer, and then with the answers and the name, employee, email, and GitHub username. And then it would push these answers to the engineer. And then after a prompt menu, so it would actually go back up to the menu here. And this menu would be shown again, and you'd have the option for engineer, intern, and finish building my team. So if they picked add an intern, then it would go down to here, and then I have the same, so the name, employee ID, email, and school, and then this would be the exact same as well, and it would prompt menu again, so they'd have those three options again. So if you were to choose build team, then it would finish building my team, and then this file system would check if any files exist synchronously, and if not, then it would make a new file, and then it would write this file using the out path, and then the generate site over here, and it would input the team members, so the data from above. And then here, prompt manager calls the manager, which is the first function to be run. So here, if we finish team, then it would finish building the team, then it would go to this generate site, and it would export this HTML page right here, which is so here I have like the style sheet and whatnot, the title, header, and then the main. So it would call this generate team and input the team data in here, which is above. So here's the generate team, and it would call on this empty array. And if generate manager was called, then it would output this HTML here with the name, ID, email, office number. And as you can see, the email has this href where it would actually link the email if you click on it so that you can send an email directly. And then it would push to the manager HTML data and onto that empty array. And then if generate engineer were called, then this function would create this HTML page with the name, ID, email, and GitHub username. So the same with the email above with the link. And then here, this would actually lead you to the GitHub page, and that would open up. And then this pushes the engineer HTML data. And then if intern were called, then the same would happen. So the name, ID, email, and school. And it would push that. So here there's actually a for loop. So if manager were equal to the get role, so this get role we created earlier, then it would the manager, and it would go through up here to the manager and generate that HTML. But if engineer were called, then it would generate the HTML according to that, and same with intern. And then it would join them all together. So here I'll actually go through it and show how it's done. So first, I'll do node app.js to run it. So it's your name. I'll just put name, email, and then random number. And then I'm going to add an engineer. So I'm just going to put Charlie, random ID, and then username would be. But you know what? I'm actually going to put my username so that you can see it pops up. And then intern. And then I'm going to finish building my team. So here everything's all done, and what's going to happen is it's going to generate an HTML. So under my output, I'll open this HTML page, and here you can see it has all this HTML. There's my manager name, ID, email, office number, and there's also the this is the engineer, and then same with the intern, so we know that it outputted correctly. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open it in a HTML. So I'll open my Chrome. And here you can say that they're all displayed. So there's Joe, the manager, with the ID, the email. I'll click on the email, and this comes up, so we know it works. Office number, and then same with the engineer, the email, GitHub username. So I'll click on this, and it actually opens it in a new tab, which is nice. And then the intern, and these are all of the commands that we wanted. And then it's also styled appropriately, so if I move it, then they align well, which is nice. And yeah. And there was also a CSS page that I created to style this, which is right over here, which you could take a look at. And this is how I had the header and the flex wrap, and then the margins and whatnot, and the different colors. Okay, well, thank you for listening.